All right, it's chapter 20 of Carlota. As I came in the next morning, Don Saturnino opened his eyes and stared at the wooden crucifix above the doorway. Donde estoy? He said. These were his first words since the day of the battle at San Pascual. At least that had heard. You are home, I said, answering his question, in your bed at Dos Hermanos. He looked at the sunlight on the windowsill. The eagle screamed in the courtyard, and he listened until it was silent. At home, he said. It is as you say, everything is here, but why? Where have I been? You were wounded in the battle, and we brought you home. The battle, yes, that I now remember. How did we fight against the gringo? My comrades, how are they? The battle is won. The gringos have fled. Your friends are safe. No one dead? No one injured? Only you, Don Saturnino. Everyone was brave, including Don Roberto. Especially Don Roberto, I said. The talk was tiring him, so I fixed the pillows under his head, gave him a drink of cold water, and slipped away. Don Saturnino had survived. I went to our chapel and knelt down in the candlelight, the warm lights that always burned there, and prayed. I gave thanks that my father was better, and that with help he would now live. I left the chapel and went out into the windy dawn with the faith that my prayers would be answered, and it seemed for a time that they would be answered. The next morning, Don Cesar Peralta drove up with two of his vaqueros. Sorry, rode up. You didn't drive up in a car. You rode up on a horse. Rode up with two of his vaqueros. He made a great commotion until the big gate had swung open. Then he rode through into the courtyard and tethered his horse. He was the only person my father permitted to ride his horse through the gate, and began shouting, Hola, Don Saturnino! Where do you hide? Under the bed? Come out, the battle is over. He strutted around the courtyard, jangling his spurs, taking his sombrero off and putting it back. Come, amigo, we will protect you. I told him how sick my father had been. We will cheer him up, said Don Cesar, and he did almost at once. The two men no sooner had embraced than he began to recount all the things that had happened during the last days of San Pascual. We drove the gringos out of the meadow, Don Cesar said. We scattered them like rabbits, and then they left the field and retreated up the hill, the one that is covered with cactus. How many of the rabbits did we kill? My father asked. 24 more or less, and many wounded. They dragged their wounded up the hill, and we allowed them to do so. Somehow they got their rifles and cannon to work. Therefore, we remained out of range and contented ourselves with riding around the hill, hurling insults. No more? Much more, mucho más, Don Cesar said, pausing to ask me for a small bite to eat. Since I wanted to hear what happened, I sent a servant to bring a bowl of frijoles and a handful of tortillas. The gringos stayed on the hill all night. At dawn, they put their wounded on travois and retreated down the valley to a peak, which they climbed. They camped then on the peak that night. No fighting, my father asked. None, Don Cesar said. But the peak we knew was without water, and the gringos had no food. They ate some of their mules to relieve their hunger. And though I was against it, my son Roberto insisted upon hoisting a white flag and sending them sugar and tea. Sancta Trinidad, sugar and tea? Sometimes my son has a soft head. That he inherits, my father said, with his first smile in many days. We kept up a heavy patrol, thinking to starve the gringos out, but that night in the darkness, El Lobo escaped. El Lobo? That is what he is called? Is it the name he was called when he was here in California months ago? His name is Carson, Christopher Carson, and he is a scout for this big Army of the West. Army of the West, my father said. That is what they call themselves. We defeated an army? We scattered it like rabbits. Like rabbits, said Don Cesar. But what about the escape of El Lobo? Yes, about him. We had a heavy patrol around the peak that night, as I have said, but somehow El Lobo got through. The next morning we found his boots in the chaparral, so he must have taken them off. He took the boots off, so as to go quietly? That is true. El Lobo is a good name for such a man. What else did this wolf do? He walked 20 leagues on feet without boots to the pueblo of San Diego, where there are some gringo soldiers and some war vessels. Then you left the peak to the gringos, my father said. There was nothing else. But we won the battle. Yes, amigo, we won. We scattered the big gringo army like rabbits. Like rabbits, my father said. Como los conejos. Yes, like rabbits, Senor Don Saturnino. Okay, there wasn't really a love story there. A little disappointing. We'll read the next chapter, though.